You're not forgetting what your doctor said because you're careless. You're forgetting because healthcare conversations are happening under conditions your brain was never designed to process clearly. And that matters a lot more than you may realize because one day you leave your appointment believing everything, saying you understood everything, only to get to the parking lot and think, wait, what exactly did they just say? And suddenly you're trying to remember what the diagnosis was, what medication you're supposed to take, what side effects was mentioned, and what follow-up you needed, what symptoms matter, and what you were actually supposed to do next, all while emotionally feeling overwhelmed because healthcare expects you to remember everything, make decisions, follow instructions, and manage your health correctly afterwards. And that is an enormous cognitive load. So today I'm talking about why this happens, why it's completely normal, how stress affects memory during appointments, and how you can better process healthcare information without feeling overwhelmed. Because forgetting isn't always the problem. Sometimes the problem is how information is simply being delivered in the first place. One of the biggest things that you may misunderstand about healthcare conversations is how stress affects the brain. Because when you're sitting in a doctor's office, your body often does not perceive that environment as neutral. Even if you realize it consciously, your nervous system may already be activated. Why? Healthcare environments often involve uncertainty, fear, vulnerability, pain, waiting, bad memories, previous trauma, or just anxiety about what you may hear. So by the time the actual conversation starts, your brain is already operating under stress. And when that brain is stressed, memory and processing change dramatically. So your brain shifts from deep processing to survival processing. And that means you retain less information, you process less detail, and your ability to organize information decreases. And this is why you can hear your words without fully absorbing the meaning. And this happens to us constantly. You're trying to listen, but simultaneously, your brain is also thinking, what does that mean? Is this serious? What happens next? Am I okay? How bad is this? How will this affect my life? So now your brain is multitasking emotionally while trying to process medical information. And that is incredibly difficult. Then let's add medical terminology, short appointment times, fast explanations, interruptions, computer screens, multiple providers, and complicated instructions. And suddenly you're expected to absorb an overwhelming amount of information in 15 minutes. That's failure right there. That's cognitive overload. Healthcare conversations move fast, okay? They move much faster than you may realize, and often providers are operating insight systems that force efficiency. So, from their perspective, they may understand the terminology instantly. They know the workflow and they recognize patterns quickly. But from your perspective, that may be the first time you've ever heard the diagnosis, the medication, the procedure, or the risks. So while the provider is speaking from familiarity, you're hearing everything through uncertainty. And those are two very different experiences. And that creates a communication gap. And it's not because anyone is intentionally trying to confuse you, but healthcare often assumes hearing information equals understanding information. And again, those are not the same thing because understanding requires context, emotional regulation, clarification, repetition, and time to process. But many appointments don't allow much space for that. So what do? You nod, and you say, all right, I got it. Yeah, that makes sense. That tracks. Even internally, you may be thinking, oh my goodness, I am completely overwhelmed right now. And honestly, Many of us do not ask questions because we're afraid of sounding unintelligent, slowing things down, appearing difficult, or asking the wrong question. So we just stay quiet and leave confused. And so later, that confusion turns into Dr. Google, guessing, forgetting instructions, medication mistakes, missed follow ups, or unnecessary anxiety. And none of that happens because you're incapable. It happens because healthcare communication is often emotionally and cognitively overloaded. And what's interesting is most people don't forget everything equally. Your brain tends to prioritize emotionally charged information. So often, what sticks is the fear, the uncertainty, the alarming words, or emotionally intense moments. Meanwhile, important practical details appear, things like dosage information, timelines, follow up plans, side effects, symptom monitoring, lifestyle recommendations, and this creates another major issue. Because now you leave with fragmented understanding. You remember pieces and not the full picture. And fragmented understanding creates confusion because now you're trying to reconstruct the conversation afterward. You replay the appointment in your head. It's like, wait, did they take this? Did they say take this before the meal or after the meal? Did they say 3 months or 6 months? Oh my goodness, was the symptom serious or expected? Did they seem concerned or not? And because uncertainty feels uncomfortable, your brain tries to fill in the missing information. And so that's when you start assuming, catastrophizing, or minimizing things incorrectly. And unfortunately, misunderstood instructions can genuinely impact outcomes. Not because you don't care, but because we cannot reliably absorb large amounts of information that's emotionally loaded under stress. And healthcare still underestimates that reality. And so, one thing that I really want to normalize is how emotionally exhausting healthcare can feel. Because you walk away from appointments carrying confusion, fear, shame, frustration, or even self doubt. And especially when you realize, I don't actually understand what's happening. And that emotional reaction matters. Because confusion creates vulnerability. And now you're trying to make decisions about your medications, procedures, symptoms, diagnoses, and the next steps without fully understanding the landscape. And that's stressful. And over time, some folks begin emotionally checking out. And it's not because they don't care, but it's because the process feels too overwhelming to keep navigating repeatedly. Some may go in the opposite direction and then become hypervigilant, researching constantly, analyzing every symptom, over monitoring everything because uncertainty feels unsafe. And both extremes, avoidance and hypervigilance, usually grow from the same root problem: lack of clarity. Because when you don't understand something important, your brain naturally tries to regain control somehow, even if that strategy isn't healthy. So now let's talk about what actually helps. Because the goal is not perfection, the goal is better understanding. And honestly, small changes can dramatically improve how much you retain from appointments. So, number one, write questions down beforehand. Do not rely on memory alone, especially when emotions are involved. Before appointments, I want you to write down your symptoms, questions, concerns, medication issues, and changes you've noticed. Because once stress kicks in, it becomes so much harder to organize your thoughts clearly. All right. You too. Focus on understanding, not impressing. You do not need to sound medically knowledgeable. You do not need to pretend you understand things you don't. And honestly, some of the most important questions are the simplest ones, like What does this actually mean? How serious is this? What should I pay attention to? Can you explain that another way? That's not weakness. This is engagement. Next, repeat information back. That's so incredibly powerful. After instructions are given, try saying, okay, so just to make sure I understand, repeat it back in your own words because this helps confirm understanding, identify the confusion, and reinforce memory. Next, bring support when possible. Another person can catch details you may miss, help process information, ask questions, and support decision making. Because when emotions are high, having another brain in the room genuinely helps. Next, slow the conversation down. You're allowed to pause. You are allowed to say, can we slow down for a second? I want to make sure I understand. And you're not inconveniencing anyone by trying to understand your health. Okay, next, review the information afterward. Don't assume that one conversation is enough. Healthcare understanding often happens in layers. So you may need time, repetition, clarification, and reflection afterward. That is normal. And then lastly, give yourself grace. This part matters so deeply. Forgetting information under stress is human. Needing clarification is human. Feeling overwhelmed in healthcare is human. And honestly, most people are carrying far more emotionally during appointments than anyone realizes. So stop interpreting confusion as failure. Confusion is a signal that you need more explanations or more support or just more time to process. And this is one of the reasons why I built Albora.health because too many people and too many people leave healthcare conversations with information, instructions, and paperwork, but not enough understanding. And then we're expected to manage our health confidently afterwards. But Albora.health bridges that gap. It helps you break down medical information. It helps you better understand lab results. It helps you organize your thoughts and figure out what questions to ask next. So you're not left trying to process everything alone because you deserve more than fast explanations. You deserve clarity. So if ever you've left an appointment still feeling like, I know they explained it, but I don't fully understand, you are not alone and you're not failing. Healthcare conversations are difficult to process under stress, but better clarity leads to better understanding, and better understanding leads to better decisions, better communication, and better care. And so, if you need help understanding your lab results and healthcare information in simpler terms, download my free Clear Lab guide below because it'll help you better understand common labs, ask informed questions, and feel more confident navigating your healthcare conversations. Until next time.